Hi, this is Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Adam Balderstone, and today we are talking about Babylon 5. We've been on a little bit of a break because I had some computer issues, so I apologize, but we're back online, and we should be finishing up Season 4 fairly soon. Today we're covering Episode 16, The Exercise of Vital Power, Episode 17, The Face of the Enemy, and Episode 18, Intersections in Real Time. Now, before we get into our overview, I understand that Adam was involved in a RPG book that recently came out, so I'm going to give Adam the floor to sort of talk about that, and then we'll get into our discussion about the episodes.
Yeah, I was doing some proofreading for the latest in Necrotic Gnome's BX Essentials series, and they're a series of books that are taking the basic and expert set D&D edition and doing a completely accurate retro clone, because it's not a book that's available in printed anywhere form. And I this is the third volume, which is Cleric and Magic User Spells, and I picked up the first volume out of curiosity. You know, I just wanted an extra copy of the BX rules because I've got my original ones from the early 80s, but I hate having other people touch them because they're so, there's no easy way to get another copy. Yeah. But so I was like, great, this will be one I can give to other people to use. But they were just so well laid out and put together that, that I actually now prefer them to the original version of the rules. And the latest volume, like I said, is the Cleric and Magic User Spells. So that was a lot of fun, being really nitpicky about going through these spells, interpreting them. What does this wording mean? And Gavin Norman, who's the author, he had a great approach of trying to word things in a very clear sense, but at the same time, if there was clearly meant to be ambiguity in a spell, leave the ambiguity there so that the game master actually can interpret things themselves to an extent, and spells don't feel completely tied down. And I think the end result came out very well. I'm very happy with it. That came out on Friday.
So I imagine we'll be using those in our D&D campaign that we were.
Yeah, I actually was using the first volume during the sessions we've already.
So I've already actually played this version and not realized it. Okay.
Well, it's from a rules perspective, it's identical to the actual BX rules. I mean, it is a retro clone, but
so it's like a pure retro clone.
It's a pure retro clone because Labyrinth Lord is the most famous BX retro clone, but it has a lot of like numerical changes. It like changes the experience points for each level. Clerics in the original BX, clerics don't get spells till second level, but Labyrinth Lord was really generous and gave clerics first level spells, and so it's like basically whenever I try and use Labyrinth Lord with my BX rules, it's like, okay, well, your book says something different than my book, but it's a really nicely laid out, cleaned up version, but the rules are completely the same within.
Okay. We'll have to we'll get into that in another episode, obviously. But Adam ran a BX game. I think we got like 3 or 4 sessions in, and it was a lot of fun. And we're gonna pick it up again, hopefully soon.
One of the players got busy with work, but we'll see if we can get her. I need to contact her and get her back into it again.
But I think we can scrounge up some players, so where can people get that? Is it available now, or is
it is available through Drive-Thru or RPG Now, whichever storefront you want to go to for it. It is available. Also, a nice touch about it too. It is saddle stitched, meaning it's staple bound, like the original BX rules were, and I find it makes it so much easier just to reference at the table when when you've got something that'll stay open easily, and they're little digest sized books. It's being saddle stitched, it puts a reduction on the page count you can have, so it's broken up into different volumes, but. Yeah, I'm very happy with the product. So it's one of those things where I'm involved with it because I was enthusiastic.
Yeah.
I'm not enthusiastic because I was involved in it. It's the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if the setup is the same now, but I know back in the '90s and in the '80s when a lot of these books were saddle stitched, I think it used to be like 32 pages, 60 something, and then like 96 pages seemed to always be the standard. Um, but I
Yeah,
don't, you know.
I think it's around 60 for RPG now. I think is their limit. But
Okay.
was just a proofreader, so that wasn't my department. But
Okay.
yeah, and another nice thing about these two, to plug the books just a little more, is that with the original books, because you got the basic set and the expert set, a lot of the rules are kind of spread between the base. The combat section, you got some rules in the basic set, then you got extra rules in the expert set, and it's not always intuitive where they are exactly, but everything is merged together in a nice way in this, so it's
Okay.
easy to find everything.
So the organization is a little bit easier to manage.
It is. It is. I mean, the original BX rules were a nice organization, definitely, but this is actually an improvement.
So
So, yeah, that's my plug for the week.
okay, all right. So people can check that out, and I guess we can jump into Babylon 5 now with episode 16, the exercise of vital power. So what is your breakdown of this episode?
Okay, let's see. This episode, we've got the Garibaldi thread continues. He finally gets to meet Edgar's, and they have a fascinating conversation about the power structure on Earth at the moment. And also, Lita encounters the frozen telepaths for the first time, and tries to help Franklin in dealing with them, which he's been having no luck with up till this point.
This and that now one of the things I liked about this portion of the of I guess the story arc for the season is things they're just as exciting, but they're not at the epic scale of all the sort of big combats that are coming down the pike and that we've had.
Yeah.
So it felt really like a nice transition. Like this felt perfect to me. This felt like okay, now and I loved, and I mentioned this last episode I think, but the noir vibe
Hmm.
that they're getting with Garibaldi, and just the opening where he's really leaning into this noir thing, and I can't remember the exact thing he said, but he basically was saying that who does Sheridan think he is? Alexander the Great, John the
Yeah.
Baptist, and you can see his programming really coming to the surface here. And it's just funny that like the more programmed. The more the programming seems to be at work, the more noir he seems to be.
Hmm.
So, so yeah. So I thought it was a really a really fun episode, and really episodes 16 and 17 together as a whole, I loved. But I don't
Yeah.
know. What were some of your thoughts of this episode?
One thing I liked about this episode, and I mean, I think it was almost enhanced. I'm kind of glad we took the break where we did because it meant the show wasn't quite as fresh in my head anymore. So I had some kind of distance from the previous
Mm.
episodes. But there is no point in this episode where you see Sheridan, aside from him being on a screen talking to people, because in both plots, both the Franklin plot and the Garibaldi
Yeah.
plot, there are people are kind of making a judgment on Sheridan. Garibaldi has to decide whether to betray him. Franklin makes the decision. Oh, Franklin is questioning what's going on with these psychics, but he ultimately decides, okay, yeah, I agree with Sheridan, but Sheridan is kept at this remove from everybody during
Mm.
this whole episode, even though he's in it, and that adds to the point of it helps you get in the mindset of both these characters who aren't sure about Sheridan,
Yeah,
to
no,
a degree.
and also as a viewer, when I first watched this, I didn't have the culmination of this plot line yet. So I mean, I had my suspicions, and they gave you plenty of hints, but
Yeah.
it was still possible. It was still kind of possible that maybe whoever was manipulating Garibaldi was a good guy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
There was
yeah,
that was sort of in the back of my head. And Sheridan's kind of doing some shady things, like you said, like Franklin. Franklin ultimately says, "Well, he's this is the correct thing," but he's pointing out that Sheridan has changed a lot since Sahadum, and even the way that Sheridan is kind of talking, it feels, he, and it all leads up. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but it all leads up to 18 because I think it's this episode or the next episode where Sheridan Ivanova mentions. I think it's the next episode, but Ivanova mentions that Sheridan says that the person is expendable, the job is not.
yeah.
There's a grim efficiency at some of the stuff he's doing, and the stuff with the telepaths. And that's pretty dark. Do you know what I mean? And so Franklin, this episode has a breakthrough with the telepaths because of Lita Alexander, and then he brings her into whatever it is Sheridan is planning. I don't think that the viewer actually hears what he says.
No, that's I honestly don't remember. It's one of those like so there's elements of the show I remember, not ones that I don't, and I am the one when I'm still in the dark about what he's planning with them. So I've completely forgotten.
Which is good. I think that's the right way for them to do this. But Franklin is obviously has his doubts, and then by the end of the episode, he and Lita are planning to take a mission to Mars to complete whatever it is Sheridan wanted them to do with these. What's the name of these telepaths that have the shadow technology implants? Do they have a particular name? Because I was struggling with that in my notes.
I in my notes I wrote shadow telepaths, and then I wrote frozen telepaths. So I don't know. I don't think they've given them a particular name. I've never heard a standard name within the fandom for them or anything. But yeah, because I started with shadow telepaths. Well, they're not really with the shadows, so that was wrong. But then I guess frozen telepaths, but they're not frozen all the time. I don't know. But yeah, it's a good. It is something I struggled with though. What do I call these guys?
But the heart of the episode is really the Garibaldi plot line where he goes to the guy's name is Edgars, right? Mr. Edgars.
Edgars, yeah.
I like that. At number one, he arrives on Mars, and again, I cannot emphasize enough how noir this feels with his narration and just his whole attitude. And is the number two guy what's that guy's name?
I should have written that.
I just called him Edgar's number two. I think is it Wade? Is that his name?
Wade. It is Wade. Yes.
So number one, I like Wade. I like the I like that he's the when he's taking Garibaldi to speak with Mr. Edgars, he makes a point of mentioning that he has a master's in literature. Which immediately I was like, okay, this is probably a point where we're going to get something important because I'm sure the writer is maybe injecting some of his own, and so he has this line in here where he says everything is a metaphor, nothing is real, and so I don't know, I just sort of wrote that down thinking, okay, that might be fodder for future discussion about the series and about maybe some of the ideas at work, which I'm sure we'll get into when we talk about the final episode this season, which definitely gets into some interesting territory. But I don't know. I found it interesting that this thug essentially has a master's in literature. So either a master's in literature isn't worth that much in the future, or he's got a shady past and something prevented him from pursuing that line of work. But I really wanted to know the backstory on this guy when I found that out.
It also kind of makes Edgars interesting that he's got this, guy with a master's in literature is his head goon,
Well, and when he speaks with Edgars, one of the first things he talks about, I think, is the Greeks and their definition of happiness, and
exactly. It's like he, Edgars values intelligence in his and his lackeys.
And so, so he finally meets Edgar's, and Edgar's. We've heard Edgar's voice, right? We've had like the Charlie's Angel thing, but we haven't actually seen
Yeah,
Edgar's. And it's funny because he kind of has like a I don't know. He just feels like one of these relics from the '70s to me when he comes on screen. He's like he seems like an aging
is.
star from the
Well, he is. I
the
mean, he's Ephraim Zimbalist
yeah.
Jr. from the FBI and stuff. So it's perfect. It
I,
is.
I can't say that I recognized him from the show, but I knew that he must have been on a show like that. When I looked it up,
Yeah.
he just had that vibe. He was somebody who he could have he he would have fit very well into like a Naked Gun movie. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
One of those kind of actors.
Exactly. Yeah. He's no. It is just perfect casting in this scene, and the scene is done so well. I mean, it's one of those things where I was really, I mean, he's kind of got this fascinating worldview. You kind of get this complex view of Earth because up till this point, it's like, oh, Earth is controlled by Clark and the Psi Corps, and that's that simple. But it's like everything becomes so much more gray, and it's like, well, yeah, Clark's just a president. We can get rid of the president anytime we want, but we just got to deal with Psi Corps first. And you're like, whoa, it's just. It just adds this whole level of depth and reality to what's going on Earth.
And we'll probably get into the next episode soon, but because this is a lot of the things that are hinted at and are relevant, you don't really know until the next episode. But during that whole discussion where he's sort of building his case, he's basically making an argument against things like the Nazis. He talks about he mentions the Nazis, then he mentions the Communist Party, and then he mentions the Jihad Party, which I assume is something that happens down the road. But it's interesting to me that he builds this case when he's essentially, as we discover in the next episode, he's kind of creating a genocide drug for telepaths. So it's it doesn't. I get the impression that Edgar's isn't, and that theme is very heavy over the course of these 3 episodes. But I get the impression that Edgar's doesn't. He doesn't, as we discover in the next episode, his intention here isn't to wipe out telepaths; it's to control them. But one consequence. Again, I think I'll save my point for the next episode because that's when it becomes relevant. But that whole conversation was very interesting because of that. All the stuff he's bringing up, and sort of his, you could swap out a few names in that speech, and you would have sort of your typical argument against the Nazi rise to power.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very complicated character. I mean, it's I just, like I said, I was just kind of really wrapped up in that conversation because there is just a lot of depth to his viewpoint, and yeah, I mean, I was just. I got this whole plot line was something I hadn't thought about as much in the show, and I'd kind of forgotten a lot of it. But it's been one of my favorite parts of the show, honestly, watching it again.
And Edgar's serves Garibaldi orange juice, which kind of got my, number one, the Godfather thing with oranges, which I feel like we've had so many orange references that I don't know. I'm always on my toes when I see anything orange in this show now. But also the basic point is Edgar's wants Garibaldi, he tells him a little bit of what he's up to, but not the whole thing. And he's like, when you say you're in all the way, then I will give you the truth. And so the story that, number one, we see a little bit of what Edgar's is up to. He goes to this weird lab and somebody's dying of a horrible disease. And if you didn't know better, you'd think, oh, Edgar's is a compassionate man trying to cure, because he even puts his hand on the guy and says, it's a terrible thing to die alone. But then the stuff you find out the next episode completely recasts everything that happens in that scene, which was one of the good things. I watched these episodes twice because I watched this one so long ago because of my computer issues it was nice to actually sort of be like, oh, that is a totally different meaning now that now that I know what's coming down the pike. But basically,
Yeah.
he's in his pharmaceutical lab, I guess, sort of, watching a man die, and out of compassion, is like, well, just let's let him die, and and in the end of the episode, Garibaldi finally decides that he's going to demonstrate his sincerity, and the way that Edgar's wants him to demonstrate his sincerity is by getting him Sheridan. And so Garibaldi says you get him by going through his father. His father has a rare blood disease. One really important detail I noticed here: a rare blood disease, and the cure for the blood, or the treatment for the blood disease, I think relies on something from Centauri. Is that correct?
I thought they said it was shadow technology, but was there a Centauri connection
I
in there
thought so.
somewhere?
Well, maybe not. I might have misheard. So I'll hold that in abeyance. But I thought that was going to become relevant next season. But if
Well, it could be actually. Maybe I'm missing the Centauri thing, and I mean, being shadow technology and being connected to Centauri can very well be the same thing. So,
okay.
maybe both those
I
points
think
are right.
I think it was called something like Tenastin or Tenastin, something like that. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, yeah.
But either way, Garibaldi says that he's in, and Edgar's is, like, well, saying that you're in is one thing. You need to demonstrate that you're in, and so he has to he basically has to, like, help him get Sheridan. So he tells him where the father is, and then it seems that he's gonna betray Sheridan in the next episode. And one other thing that happened this episode that was important is the whole interrogation thing with Garibaldi and the telepath, where Edgar wakes him up in the middle of the night and asks, he has a telepath there, and he just basically is trying to find out, his feelings on telepaths seem to be the main thing he wanted to know. But he also, at the end of it, is like, oh, and one other thing, do you still love my wife? And
Yeah.
which didn't really go anywhere. I was kind of,
It didn't. I honestly, the whole thing, that whole plot line there with the wife there, just didn't do much for me. I felt like, the conversations he has with her over these two episodes, I feel like, yeah, we've already had the conversations about you loved your work and you didn't spend enough time with me. I mean, it just felt like we're going around the same loop again here that we went through last time this character popped up, and we haven't gone forward in any direction.
I think one of my other issues with that one is I just have trouble accepting that Garibaldi is the kind of person that gets hung up on that sort of thing. You know what I mean? I could believe it with a guy like Sheridan, but a guy like Garibaldi doesn't seem like the sort of person who would, like, pine at great length. And so
I could see that too. Yeah.
But it was an interesting scene, and they end up killing the telepath after Garibaldi leaves. They shoot her, and which, I guess, if you have it kind of makes sense, like, why they're doing it. They probably could have just put her on that drug, though, I would imagine, and then keep her on retainer at their compound.
That's true. That's true.
But yeah, so but then moving into the next episode, The Face of the Enemy, unless you had something you wanted to add.
No, I think I'm ready for the next episode. Yeah.
So, and this one just kind of continues the storyline of the previous one. We get to see Lita and Franklin arrive in Mars, and Lita Ford Gina Davis, I can't remember her name, but that's what I'm going to be calling her. She the Mars resistance leader, she is not happy that Franklin has brought a telepath, and we learn that Lita was on Mars before and didn't tell them she was a telepath, which, when I looked up in the Lurker's Guide, apparently she contradicts something that she said in an earlier episode, which plants either the question of a consistency issue, or Lita is not being fully honest with people somewhere along the line.
Lita Alexander or Lita Ford?
Oh, Lita Alexander. Yeah, I maybe I need to come up with a new... that's going to get confusing.
Yeah, that just hit me. But yeah, that's an interesting point there on the inconsistency. But yeah, I mean, one thing I like though is the whole Mars plot too. I mean, the thing is that the issues that Edgar's is dealing with. I mean, his horrible plague he wants to spread is probably not the best solution, but he is dealing with something that is this horrible, horrible problem that the Vorlons have created with humanity, where they've created this whole class of telepaths and non-telepaths, and it is
But
just like this difficult problem.
I'll point out one thing. Number one, other races have telepaths and seem to have figured it out without
Oh
an
yeah.
issue. Um, so I feel like and every time like Edgar's number two guy is kind of making the same argument that people made on Zahadum. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
it's very sort of early 20th century ideas of genetic superiority and things like that.
Well,
I feel like Edgar's is looking at it through through too negative a point of view, because everything that
I
I've seen
agree.
with Psycor, the reason that Psycor is behaving the way they are is because they've been pushed to the side and mistreated,
Exactly.
and not even with Bester you see that, like, if somebody was just nice to Bester, I'm telling you that guy would not be the villain that he is. And so
Well,
I oh, go ahead.
I was saying, yeah, it's because exactly. I mean, it's if psychics were people's, brothers or people's mother or something, it's like it would be, it wouldn't be this huge divide. But yeah, it's like they've, because I'm not saying it has to be that problem. Like you say, other races in the show have done just a sensible job of incorporating them into their society. But it's like it's been built into this situation where, because there is no natural connection between anyone that's a psychic and anyone that isn't, it's become this problem.
But again,
And it's
I don't think that's the Vorlon's fault. I think that's the humans were the ones who made Psycor and did this whole Psycor is mother, Psycor is that's like a recipe for them being for them viewing themselves as not part of the society, and so therefore they can easily become enemies of the society.
Oh, see, but here, taking the Vorlon philosophy, though, Vorlons for the ones that the younger races need to be guided. Them
Mm.
just dumping all these telepaths into the
Okay,
human gene pool and then not being there to help humanity deal with this is
that's
is
true.
a violation of their own code.
Okay,
It's
fair
like
enough. Fair enough.
with the Minbari had guidance from the Vorlon, so it's like the Minbari have this really enlightened attitude towards telepaths, but they got, their parents were there for them.
But I think there's only so much you can only blame the Vorlons for so many things. You got
I know. I'm
it's
just turning their own code on them.
but
That's all.
but I feel like I don't know. I feel like it's a very interesting problem, but I think Edgar's is a genocide drug is not the is not the solution. Now, granted, he's trying to
I
use it
am not in any way
no
defending the genocide
no
drug. Just to be on the
no,
record.
and in fairness to Edgar's, he's not planning to wipe out telepaths initially. At least that's not. So here's the thing: when he finally
Unless they're trouble and
so
they pull the
yeah
drug back. As
so
long as they do everything they're told, I'm not going to wipe you out, which is
so
a very enlightened viewpoint.
So a number of things happen. Number one, Lita explains that there are these new bloodhound units that do deep scans of people, and she
Mm.
gets into her backstory. And apparently, there was some killer who went around murdering telepaths, and Psycor took it into their own hands. And we get the impression that she was involved in sort of the unofficial retribution that resulted in this guy being found and then put in an asylum somewhere in a distant place where he's got all these nightmarish hallucinations that he experiences 24/7,
Yeah.
and 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 in order to find them, they were using these deep scans, and so the Bloodhound unit is the same type of thing. And the deep scans, they're really thorough, but apparently they're much more dangerous because they can trigger things like heart attacks and strokes and all kinds of nasty side effects. So that's a very important piece of information that we learn while Franklin and Lita are doing their thing on Mars. And with the Edgar's plot, once what ends up happening is they get the father, and Garibaldi sends a message to Sheridan, who just stupidly boarded the Agamemnon after. So there's this whole thing where there's this battle, and they're convincing Earthships to take their side. At the very end of the battle, the Agamemnon shows up, and as soon as they say we're on your side, Sheridan is like, I'm going aboard. That was monumentally stupid, in my opinion.
Yeah,
why wouldn't he had the captain of that ship come onto his ship? Like, it just, because they could. It's such an obvious trap, and I don't even remember what happens with the Agamemnon after this, but I feel like it just seems like it was sent by Clark to get.
Well, it turned out not to be. I mean, it was pretty, because I mean, they didn't spring a trap, I don't think, but it's still, it just.
No, but they could have still been working with Edgar's or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's.
I don't know if Edgar's would have been in a position to set up sending the Agamemnon there. I mean, I don't feel like his power structure lies in that direction. I don't know. That's
but Edgar's was doing it in order to please Clark, so he could have been working with Clark in tandem to get
That's
Sheridan
possible.
there.
It's possible.
Though if they've got him on the Agamemnon, I guess they wouldn't need that extra.
That's true.
Extra
they could have just taken him.
Yeah, it would be.
Why then have him go off and yield Garibaldi? But
so yeah, I think you're right. But he ends up on a bar in Mars, where Garibaldi arranges for them to meet. Garibaldi says, they got your dad, but I got some people in place. And if we move now, we can get them. But they need to see you personally because they're worried it's a setup, which is like the worst. Like, you just know it's not true. Ivanova right away even says it. She's like, I don't like the way it sounds. This is awful. It's a trap. And Sheridan stupidly goes. I really maintain this was I know it's his dad, but I think that Sheridan at this point should understand that you do not. He's the leader of this big movement. He can't just go there for personal reasons. I agree. It was really, really, really irresponsible. I mean, but he gets to the bar and we find out 90s music is alive and well on Mars in the future with that the background.
That was really 90s. Yeah. That was super 90s. That's the most 90s the show has ever been. Was that music?
It sounded like a Courtney Love impression was being done on the stage. And Garibaldi tranks Sheridan as soon as he sits at the table, and then Sheridan. I was happy the way Sheridan went out. He really went down like a man. Like he it was like perseverance in action. He was the trank was gonna do its thing, but he was gonna take as many people down as he could, and he was still like to the very bitter end, trying to remain standing. But eventually, he is caught and falls right into the hands of Harlan Ellison, and ultimately is actually no, I'm getting my lines crossed. It was Garibaldi who fell into the hands of Harlan Ellison.
Harlan Ellison, so,
but Sheridan's caught, and we see him in the next episode. In the he doesn't have a good time.
No. But yeah, basically from that point we have Garibaldi and Bester have their meeting, where it's finally revealed Bester was behind Garibaldi's brainwashing, and he lets Garibaldi remember everything, which is probably the cruelest thing he could have done.
Yeah, and so after Garibaldi tranks Sheridan, he is now told the full truth by Edgar's, and which is what Bester wanted him to do. That's why he was programmed.
Oh yeah, I'm leaving out a huge amount.
Well, no, that's okay because we jump around all over. But there's a point I want to make. So at that point, he learns about the virus and exactly how it works and how it binds to the gene that causes telepathy. But humans are immune, and if they don't get this antidote every 10 days, they die. But there's an interesting moment where Edgar's just sort of musing. Well, we can get the virus out in a couple of days, and he says the And he realizes what he's doing. He realizes he sounds like Hitler, and then he's like, the telepath problem will finally be over. But you get the impression that Edgar's like at that moment is like, oh, what am I doing?
Moment of clarity.
And then we get the Harlan Ellison cameo where Garibaldi pulls out his molar. I guess he had some kind of implant in his teeth, and he sends a signal to Bester, and then he meets Bester, and Garibaldi's basically on autopilot. As soon as he's done what Bester needed him to do, he just becomes a drone, and Bester is sort of sitting there and talking about, well, what should I do with you now that this is all I needed you for, and so I'm going to be magnanimous because you've averted a genocide, but Bester has an interesting line here. He says, I'm not capricious or cruel," which I think is true. I think Bester is very much about what Bester, what's good for Bester and his goals and the goals of the telepaths. Though I think he doesn't mind getting a little bit of revenge against the people of Babylon 5 for being so mean to him. But I don't know. It was an interesting moment for Bester to sort of be on there, sort of learning about, because he was obviously surprised by what Garibaldi uncovered. He knew something was going on, but he was not expecting it to be this scale of a problem.
I like that Bester didn't know what was going on. It would have been easy to have him go, yes, you've helped me get their plot and everything, but it's like he's like kind of taken aback by what was actually going on.
And then he says, we'll deal with it in our own way, which is exactly what Edgar said when he was talking about the telepath. So, so problem solved and a new problem emerges, I guess, is the way to look at it. Because I'm guessing this is where a seed is now being planted for Bester, because, I mean, once Bester realizes this, and this doesn't come up the rest of the season, so I'm just speculating. But once Bester realizes that the humans are willing, not the humans, the non-telepaths are willing to engage in this kind of a
solution.
This kind of solution. He probably sees that his own options for dealing with the non-telepaths are limited to these kinds of solutions as well. So I don't know. What did you think of this episode? I see it as basically the same continuation of the previous episode, and
it's part 2. I think I like the previous episode just a little bit better because it's this is more of a resolution of the things that are brought up in the previous episode to an extent. But I mean that's for me as someone that kind of knew some of the things ahead of time. So on a rewatch, I think I found the previous episode more fascinating. But yeah, I mean, this is still a very good episode. It's
I definitely enjoyed it. And it brings us right into the next episode, which is Intersections in Real Time, which is a really weird title. I actually had to look it up because I was like, "Well, what the?" It didn't dawn on me what the meaning was. But when I looked it up, apparently it's because all the moments occurring in there. So in this episode, Sheridan is they're trying to get him to do a forced confession. So they're sort of giving him the old classic torture mind. I don't know. I guess brainwashing is. It's not quite brainwashing. It's more like they're just trying to get him to understand the situation and play ball with it, I guess. But
I think there was a fair amount of brainwashing in there.
But I think it was more just wearing him down. Was my impression of it. Like,
that's a big part of brainwashing.
Yeah, I guess so. But I figured at the end of the process, they don't need him to actually believe these things. They just need him to be willing to say these things.
That's true. That's true.
But yeah, they are sort of like, they're warping reality around him, and they're playing all kinds of mind games, and so, but the reason why it's called Intersections in Real Time is because the moments where he's having those interrogations, even though there are breaks between, are done in real time. which
Okay.
I didn't even notice. Like I never made that connection. I had to look it up. But that definitely is what makes this episode feel different. It feels kind of like a stage production almost
Very much.
with
Yeah.
it's just him and the interrogator, and the interrogator couldn't be more everyday. I'm just doing my job, kind of an interrogator. I have no personal interest in you. But I don't know.
Yeah.
What
It's
did
a
you think
little
of?
little reminiscent of Michael Palin's character in Brazil, I thought, to an extent. I mean, they're different, but there was the similarity there.
What did you think of the episode?
Yeah, it's a great episode. I mean, it does. It's once again too. You've had it kind of the show's kind of held Sheridan at a distance for a little while at this point. So it's kind of interesting. We're finally back again with Sheridan kind of being the protagonist of the story again in this one after this long break. And but yeah, I man, this is I think this was really well done. I like the mind games they play in this, and it's kind of funny too. The guy who played the Drazi, there's a Drazi that's brought in to say that he's one of the aliens that helped control Sheridan and influence him, and but the Drazi is Wayne Alexander, who's the same actor that played Jack the Ripper
Okay.
in the Becomes the Inquisitor episode. So I thought it was kind of interesting that this is like the second time we've had an episode that's basically about well, not it's where the whole episode kind of centers around someone being tortured. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess you'd kind of say there's a Jakar episode like that, but there was a lot more going on. But
It was definitely a torture episode. But it was more
yeah.
on a mental level than I mean. There was some physical stuff, but the bulk of it was like, uh, "Good morning. Oh, look at the time. It's lunchtime, isn't it?"
Well,
And the idea is he wants to convince Sheridan that the truth is fluid, the truth is subjective, it's subject to the whims of the government, basically,
yeah.
and that the role of the soldier is just to sort of agree with whatever the government has to say, whether he thinks it's true or not. And and he makes some very sort of specious but compelling arguments to make his case.
Yeah.
You know, and again, this is well before the days of like internet trolling and before people had access to all this. So I thought it was well done, given and I like, for me, the best moment in the episode is the corned beef sandwich. That's the one where you really sort of feel Sheridan's pain in the because they do a good job of making the sandwich appealing and seem delicious.
Oh
And
yeah, I wanted that sandwich.
yeah, and then he convinces Sheridan it's not poison, but then he tells him soon after he eats it. The funny thing about toxins is, if you take a little bit at a time, you're basically immune to the effects. And then he comments that I always thought that was a metaphor, but could never be sure what it was a metaphor for. And so it's and obviously it's kind of what they're trying to do to Sheridan, to everybody in the society, is to sort of get them to sort of just a drop at a time start to accept this distorted worldview that President Clark is trying to get everybody to believe in. And so I don't know, it was a good episode. It's all in one place. It all I mean, it's really just kind of a conversation over time where Sheridan is resisting the process, and in the end he does resist it, but then he's brought, he's basically convinced that they're gonna kill him if he doesn't sign the confession and do a video thing. And they're like, look, we're gonna forge your signature anyways and make a video forgery of you doing a confession, but it's way more helpful for our purposes if you're alive, so we can send you to like Tahiti on vacation and people can see that you're still alive, that it lends more plausibility to our lie.
Yeah.
And the guy even starts to shed a bit of a tear, and you're wondering, is this guy acting? Is he as convinced of the process as Sheridan is? When they wheel him into the next room where he thinks he's going to be executed, they just basically rearrange the execution chamber and set up the whole procedure again with a new interrogator, which I thought was a really clever, interesting way to end the episode. And
it was. You talk about the whole thing takes place in one room, and it's like at one point, oh, we're going to a different room, and you go in there, and it becomes the same room.
Yeah.
It's like, because there is this kind of feeling. It's like, I mean, obviously watching it, you don't want Sheridan to die, but it's like you can almost get this feeling of relief. Sheridan's like, yeah, I've made it. It's like, yeah, they're gonna kill me, but at least I've held to my integrity. It's like it's almost a victory when he's kind of getting sent to the execution chamber. But there is no execution chamber. It's just more torture.
Yeah. So on the one hand, it's sort of meant to be deflating, but on the other hand, it kind of shows that that's the best they can do. Do you know what I mean? Like
that's true.
Because Sheridan's whole point is all you have to do is I forget the exact way he phrases it, but say no one more time than they try to get you to say yes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's phrased much better than that, but it's a simple but effective way to get somebody to persevere through a process like that. And so I think in the end Sheridan wins. I think Sheridan's the one who wins this over the state that's trying to defeat him. And also there's that line in there, "We are all expendable," which he's kind of throwing back Sheridan's own rhetoric.
Yes. What Ivanova was saying the same thing in the previous episode. That was really, really glaringly obvious that it's like, oh, it's the same philosophy, but it's horrible.
Yeah. So it's there's a lot of very well done stuff in this episode and around this episode. So I enjoyed it. It is one of those episodes though that the replay value it's not as good as the previous two episodes, because this one, once you see it, that the joy is sort of in seeing everything unfold. And in the other episodes, there's enough sort of classic sort of TV components that you're just as engaged the second time around, I find. So this one, it's more the fun of viewing it the second time is looking for things that you might have missed. But
it's obviously it's a rewatch for me as well, but it's a 15-year later rewatch, so I was able to enjoy it again. But there were definitely things that didn't hit me as strongly as they did the first time. So I remembered elements. I remembered, the poison sandwich, and I remembered the big trick at the end with the room, becoming the same room. There were elements I didn't remember enough to make it entertaining again, but the really big moves the episode made, I was like, yeah, I know where this is going.
And I like the guy they got for the interrogator. He was perfect. I know I've seen him in a million things. I don't know who he is, but I know I've seen his face everywhere.
That was great casting with him.
And he got it just right, because there were times where you genuinely believe that, because he was trying to do the thing where he was convincing Sheridan that he's the only ally that Sheridan has there, but also being the one who administers all the painful torture that he's experiencing. So he walks that fine line, and you do kind of believe him at times. It's plausible that this guy is just doing his job. Do you know what I mean? It's plausible that he really doesn't want to be doing what he's doing. And even at the point when he's kind of shedding a tear because Sheridan thinks he's going to die in the next room, I really didn't know by the end of the episode whether that guy was in on the whole procedure or if he legitimately thought Sheridan was going to die in the next sequence. Do you know what I mean? I don't know how far up this guy's knowledge goes beyond his one place in the process. So, and I'm inclined to think he doesn't. I'm inclined to think he's just a cog in the machine. That's sort of the point of it.
They make the point about how, he's not replaceable. He's someone that can, as an interrogator, you've been given a special status of being, we're not allowed to kill you. And that's a very special status even I don't have. And I mean, that was just a very dark commentary on the society they're in there. There's just a lot of really, really clever clever stuff going on in this episode, I thought.
And yeah, so yeah, I thought it was good. And I think it really gets. I know where things are going because I watched ahead to the end of the season, but this stuff really leads well into what's coming down the road for the show in the ensuing episodes. So
Yeah. I said the show spent a lot of time in recent episodes keeping Sheridan at a distance and making you question him, and I mean, this was an episode where it was kind of refreshing that it just won you back to Sheridan again. You know, if you actually had any doubts about him, it let Sheridan do what he does best, which is be really stubborn.
Well, and I think it's borne out in the end because Sheridan definitely does what I wouldn't have done at the end of the season, which we can get into next. But I mean, I think he definitely he definitely remains the hero by the end of the season for sure.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so I guess we're coming on the hour, so we'll end it there unless there's something else you want to add about the episode.
No, I think I'm good.
And so we will be back on during the week with the next 2 or 3 episodes, I believe, and we will also be on Friday. I know we didn't post a movie this Friday, but this coming Friday, starting for February, we're going to be doing all of the Brave Archer series. Sort of for like the love theme of Valentine's Day, and we'll be doing I think Chinese Ghost Story for the final Friday, and yeah, so we'll keep you updated, and also you can check out me and Kenny's discussion of Return of Condor Heroes. We are reading through the Return of Condor Heroes and doing 5 chapters at a time where we talk about the story, and then when me and Adam finish Babylon 5, we'll be doing the 2006 Return of Condor Heroes television series, which interestingly enough, me and Kenny were crunching the numbers. It takes longer, we think, to watch the show than it does to read the book. The TV we were trying to break it down by hours, and we're pretty sure that the show takes more hours to watch.
I believe that. I mean, I don't know. It takes longer to perform something than to read something. So.
Well, it's just funny to me because I always sort of think of like the live action version of something being like the shortcut. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like, but like you're really doing it the long way around when you do it by the series. Now that when we actually looked at the amount of episodes.
Usually things are condensed into a movie, and when you got a movie, they cut so much out. So, but if you're actually going to do a TV series and actually perform the whole book, it's going to be longer.
Yeah, I guess it's like the audiobook effect. If you read the entire audiobook, it takes longer than it does to actually read it for most people. So,
yeah.
Though I have to admit, I always read. I like to know the sounds of the words, so I always read things as if they're being spoken.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, that's just besides the point. We will be back next week, and until then, we'll talk to you later.